Hey, hello and welcome. This is Summer Piha from the Conscious.Classroom Certification Model. Check us out at cccmodel.com. You're listening to Let's Talk ECE, the place on the internet where we talk tips, tricks, and perspective shifts related to all things early childhood. Join Summer and Rachel in their mindset shifting discussions on common topics in the early childhood world. You'll hear real stories from their time working together as an owner-director pair and how they learn to see things from each other's perspectives over the years, so you can learn how to openly discuss these viewpoints and find common ground within your leadership team. There is a difference between knowing and doing. I have said this phrase at least 1,000,000 times over the years in my work with early childhood education. Right? Whether it's a parent saying one thing and doing the complete opposite, or a team member self-sabotaging, even though we've walked through the steps to get to the next level. So why as humans do we have a resistance even though we know better? First off, I want to talk about and define what we mean by the word resistance. Okay, so the dictionary defines resistance as the refusal to accept or comply with something, the attempt to prevent something by action or argument. But it's so much more complex than that. Okay, in our day, resistance isn't just about pushing back against something we don't agree with, right? Often it's things that we're resisting that take us to the next level. Okay, the next chapter, the next part of our story. And the next challenge that will just take us to new heights. When we get stuck and we don't move forward because we don't take time to identify the resistance, and without identification, you can't move into action.
Yeah, but it's such an interesting topic, and I'm really excited that we're talking about this today because people can and do get stuck for so many different reasons.
Absolutely.
Everyone's resistance is different. It can be different factors at different times too. Like it's not just the stagnant thing. Resistance truly looks different for different people at different stages, which it does make that like identifying it a little bit tricky, I think. I know there have been times that I felt resistance because I was just completely overwhelmed, right? And my resistance was, I don't want to take something else on. I know there are times I felt resistance because I was just frustrated or annoyed. And I was like, I'm going to push back on this because it's going to make you happy and I'm mad about it, right?
Yeah.
I know there are times that I felt resistance because I just didn't understand the why behind something, and you know how challenging that is for me. That might be a good time to we could talk about that story at some point here because that is a big one. But yeah, it's wild.
Well, I do think, Rachel, I do think resistance absolutely takes different forms and can come from different places. But I genuinely think one of the most common places it comes from is negative thinking.
Ooh, okay. I have never actually thought about it like that. And I think that you are absolutely right. You really think you're right.
So whether it's thinking negatively about people or about your own abilities, about the community, whatever it is, it's that negative thinking that really steers avoidance and resistance to something.
Yeah.
Let's give an example. Let's talk about this.
Okay, let's I mean, I think this is a good time. There's that story, right, where one of the resistance that I ran through was when we hired a social media person, right? And the resistance for me was not knowing the why. I didn't know that was my resistance at the time, but it was coming from this negative space where I was like, I don't understand why you're doing it this way, so I'm going to push back. Yes, you told me exactly what I should do. Yes, you put everything in the space. That's great. And I'm going to push back against it, right? And then I got the why, and I was like, oh, okay, I can move forward with this. But because I didn't identify it myself, we had months of like me just pushing back and making everyone's life so much harder than it needed to be.
Really fun for the person in the middle.
But I couldn't identify it. And that's why I am so excited that we're talking about it. And I love that you framed it like that, that it is that negative thinking, because for me, and shows that what we need to identify, what is really holding you back from something, right? I think a lot of times the first level of resistance, like the reason we give, is to cover it with an excuse. So like for me, I didn't say I don't like not knowing the why. My excuse was I don't feel like this fits my brand, right? Like that was my excuse, but it wasn't really what was going. Do you feel like that's accurate?
I do. Absolutely. I think so many times the excuse is the cover for the actual resistance. Rachel, so I love that you had the like work example, but this brings up something in my mind where like my husband's car tabs were expired. And it stresses me out when stuff like this happens. It's so easy. Just go online, put your license plate in, put your VIN in, put your insurance in, and move forward with your life, right? Like right. Push the button, push the damn button. And they've literally been expired 6 months now. And yesterday I got the thing in the mail for my tabs. So I went and did all the things. Right. And finally I just called them and I was like, what is your license plate number? Like, I'm renewing your tabs for you right now. And so when we're talking about resistance, like it pops up everywhere. It's not just like resistance at work or resistance to get ahead in your career. Why is he resistant to just do these life things, right? And guess what? His tabs were $481. Maybe that was his resistance. Maybe he got the thing and like shut down because that's a lot of money, right? So maybe he was just like, I'll do it later because that's a lot of money.
Yeah.
And like push the button, do the things you're supposed to do. But like there's clearly something that's blocking him from moving forward on just these tasks that for me, I don't have that same resistance because like being compliant drives me. And I think that that's part of being in the early childhood education field, right? Like, let's be compliant. So I think it's really interesting when we talk about identifying and the excuse being the cover up for what the actual resistance is. Now, I can guarantee you, Eric, my husband, is not going to sit down and talk about like, what's the resistance? Why I didn't push the button on renewing my tabs? Like he's just not there.
Yeah.
But I think it does lead to a deeper conversation. What do you think?
Well, I love that. I love that for a couple of reasons. One, I think it allows us to give a lot more grace to other people too, right? Because I think there can be that natural, like, a lot of times I could see the excuse in that situation being like, well, I'll do it when I have time. Oh, I've been so busy, so I didn't have time, right? And you're like, it takes literally 30 seconds. That's an excuse. But then you took that second to be like, okay, it's $400 and something. That's a lot of money. Maybe that's where that resistance came from. So I can just push the button.
Yeah.
Right. Like, where is that kind of give and take too? And I think I love that you brought it up that way because it allows you to give other people grace. And I think in those leadership roles, that's so, so important. I think like just thinking through this, because I'm a list person. I like going through how to identify these things. And I think if we're going to actually take that action, right? Buy the tabs, do whatever the social media person tells you to do, like just actually take the action, we have to be able to identify that resistance, right? Yes. And to take steps. And in my head right now, I'm thinking through what those would be. And I feel like it's going to be that notice the thing that you're not getting done. And of course, there are always going to be a few things that aren't getting done, but there's always like one or two big things, right? Whether it's like paying your tabs, or rewriting a policy, or really coming down and having a hard conversation with a staff member. Like, there's one thing that is just not getting accomplished that has to, and it's in your head every day. So I think this first step would be like identifying what that is, right? And then I think step 2 is figure out what the excuse is. What is the excuse we're using? And that, I feel like 90% of the time is going to be, we don't have enough time, or nobody's going to accept it. And we just have to acknowledge that this is an excuse. This is a baseline level. It's not actually what's stopping us. It just sounds good enough and realistic enough that we hope other people will buy it, right? And then I think that last piece is, okay, now we have to figure out, now we figured out that excuse out of the way. We have to sit with ourselves and say, why, where is this resistance actually coming from? Is it that, what negativity, like you said, what negative talk is happening? Is it because we don't believe we'll be able to accomplish it or keep it up? Is it because we're scared that people on our team will quit? Is it because, it feels like something about it is off and we actually need to put in additional work to revamp it, whatever this policy is, we have to make those tweaks, and that's additional levels of work and we're not sure where to start? Is it because we're perfectionists and we know there's something about this that is not perfect, so we're making up excuses to not put an imperfect thing out there even though we have to, right? It's like, those are my 3, I think.
Oh, that makes so much sense. So identify what's not getting done.
Yeah.
Figure out the excuse, and then dig deeper to figure out what's the actual thing that's causing the resistance.
Yeah. That's much more succinct.
No, I love it. I just wanted to clarify. I love it so much. So, which to me, okay, this brings up a new question. Once you identify the resistance, then what?
Ooh.
How do you face it?
Ooh, that is a good question. I think the first thing that comes to mind for me is when we're working with clients, one of the big things that we work on are cognitive distortions, right?
Absolutely.
And if you're listening and you don't know what a cognitive distortion is, Google it, or, you can hire us and come hang out and I'll walk you through it. That's fine. But when we talk about the base of that resistance really being fear, that is where that cognitive distortions come from. And a cognitive distortion is a way that your brain distorts reality to try to keep you safe, right? So I think that is where that really pops up for me, where it's like, okay, there's probably some kind of a cognitive distortion, and that is where resistance is starting.
Yes, absolutely. Well, first of all, cognitive distortions are just fascinating in general.
Yeah.
But when we add the topic of resistance to it, I think that is just a goldmine of information.
Yeah.
So, okay.
Yeah, and I think for me, like, what are the steps of those cognitive distortions, right? So, and this is what we talk with our clients about too, but going through this, like, identify that you're having those negative thoughts. So identify what the real resistance is, right? Challenge those negative thoughts and then reframe them so you can take action.
Yes.
And I think, like, I'm willing to go through an example here. Like, I told you on Monday, I was like, I didn't make a social media post. That was my bad. And part of it was this cognitive distortion of me saying, it was discounting the positives, right? Because I was like, nobody interacts with them anyway. I'm sitting here and I'm putting so much effort into it. Why am I doing this? And then I had to sit back and I had to challenge those negative thoughts and say, okay, well, yes, they don't have a ton of interaction. And how many people, Summer, do we have stop us and tell us all the time? Like, oh my gosh, you're everywhere. It's so fun to see. Or text us randomly and be like, this post made so much sense to me and really thankful you shared it. Can we have some additional questions around that? Like, it's working, but I guess it's like that dopamine hit from the
instant gratification, right? That instant gratification.
So I had to really reframe that and say, okay, I'm not getting the likes on social media and it's still working and people are seeing it and people are getting value from it. And therefore I can continue moving this information forward because it is beneficial.
Okay. Can I jump in?
Yes.
I just want to ask something here.
Yeah.
So if we have like, okay, identify you're having negative thoughts.
Yep.
And then challenge those thoughts and reframe them. How do you start to reframe if that's not something that you're used to doing?
I think that's such a good question because it does take a lot of practice. And I think one of the best things you can do is find somebody that you really, really trust. Like if it's really hard for you to reframe and think positively, you're the hardest person on yourself. So if you have somebody in your life, you're like, this is how I'm perceiving this. Do you think this is accurate? Be willing to like rely on people for a little bit. I think also just asking the questions and taking your feelings out of it and going into data, right? Like we had that whole episode on data, not drama. And this is exactly it. I had to take my emotions out of it of I don't feel like this is getting recognized, to go and like look at the data.
Yes.
How many people are reaching out regardless? How many phone calls are we still getting? What has been the increase in interactions in other ways? That is actual data.
Okay. So interesting. Like those of you who know me know I'm a bit of a perfectionist. Like it's something I've been really, really working on. And so when I get hard on myself and I'm always like, oh, that was so stupid. Why did I do that? That was so dumb. Why did I do it that way? Right. You are always the one who's like, hey, be nice to my friend. Stop talking about my friend that way. And for me, that has really helped me be like, yeah, you're right. I would never talk about another person the way I talk about myself. So finding that trusted person to lean on and to say like, hey, I'm spiraling. I'm getting really stuck here.
Yeah.
Or maybe not even I'm spiraling. I'm getting really stuck here, but just like,
I can't see this another way. Like I really,
yes. Okay. So that's a good way to start that reframing process.
Yeah.
Okay. Cool.
Yeah.
Like I was gonna say for people who like this is all brand new.
Yeah.
I always love to make sure we're leaving action steps instead of just being like, hi, here's more information. But like, how do we really put this into practice? That's really important to me.
It is really important. It's so important.
Which, okay, actually leads us to getting unstuck.
Yeah.
Okay. So this just ties in really nicely to my thought of information plus action plus inspiration and accountability equals getting unstuck. So, right?
You need to make a poster. I think that has to be like
So, okay. So we know and understand that as humans, we're just resistant to things, right? Whether it's that career ladder or pushing the button to get the tabs or posting social media posts without knowing the why behind it, right? Like we're just resistant to things.
Yeah.
So we know what's right. We know the right decision, but making action choices to line up with that, it's hard. We make action choices that aren't in line with our goal. I think about parents all the time.
Yeah.
Right? Like we know as parents, like our job is to guide and shape our children so they can go into the world and be productive members of society, which means we have to say no sometimes and we have to discipline, and discipline doesn't mean punish, but we have to guide, right? Yeah. And sometimes that's hard. A lot of times that's hard. There's a lot of parenting and adulting in general that I'm like, why did you tell me it was going to be this hard? Right. But making action choices that are in line with the end goal. So what happens when we break through the resistance and get unstuck? Yeah.
I love that.
That's big.
Love that. And I love it so much for so many reasons. One, it's addressing the fact, because you have that aspect of accountability in there, right? Because it's, information plus action plus inspiration and accountability. And as human beings, we need community. We very seldom get things done in a vacuum or through isolation. We do things because it fits into a bigger vision and a bigger community, right? So there's that accountability aspect. And two, like, just how many times have we had this exact conversation with clients, and that is what shifts them. We work with some of the most incredible ECE leaders in the world. Like, we work with the best of the best. And so we don't necessarily have to teach them a lot of new skills a lot of the time. A lot of the time they have those skills, but it's knowing when to use them. And it's almost just this giving permission to do the things they already know they have to do, right? To get the thing done and hold their feet to the fire a little bit and give them permission to do that. Like, it's so important.
Absolutely. I mean, think of the email I just sent off this morning. I sent an email to one of our clients this morning that said, hey, you're unveiling this at your leadership team meeting today. And I had told her, I said, if you don't unveil it to your leadership team, I have enough of a relationship with your entire leadership team that I will unveil it tomorrow. So you do it today, or I'm going to do it tomorrow, right? Like, holding their feet to the fire. And I will tell you, if you're the person that buys all the books or takes all the trainings or goes to all the conferences, that's collecting information. You're an information collector.
Yeah.
This is your sign to take action. Information plus action plus inspiration and accountability equal getting unstuck. And so if you need that additional layer of accountability, give us a call. We'd love to watch you level up your program and walk next to you every step of the way. I'll send out those emails. I'll create those relationships, make it happen. Right. Well, okay, everyone. We really hoped you were able to get out a lot out of today's episode, and encourage you to subscribe, leave a review, check out our show notes if you want to know how we can support you in holding you accountable. Thanks, everyone.
Bye.
See you next time.